one of you are choosing to be in this room tonight. Maybe it's personal, maybe you're being proactive, maybe it's come up in your child's life, maybe it's come up in their friend's life and in your community, and you're just trying to get some more information. So just thank you for being here tonight. So again, my name is Kaitlin Byrne. I am a mental health therapist. I currently work at a place called Skyland Trail for adolescents, 14 to 17-year-olds, most of who are with us because they have attempted suicide at some point or have had ideations for a really long time, are in self-harming severely, or are severely depressed or struggling with anxiety to where they can't go to school. So usually they'll come to us at some point in time, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So I work every single day with this subject matter, and I talk directly about it with my kids, my clients, their families, try to do a lot of research to learn more and to be able to serve this population a lot, especially as it is something that is on the rise. And I'm sure maybe that's the reason that you're here, is you're just hearing so much more about this, right? So we're going to do a deep dive into all of that tonight. But before we get started, I want you to know it is 100% appropriate to get up and excuse yourself at any point in time during this talk. I will not be offended. If it just becomes too overwhelming or too sensitive, you just need to take a break, anything like that. There may come a time when I share some stories from my experience with my clients. Obviously very, very simplified, not giving too much detail, but if it comes up and it feels appropriate to share in those moments, and then of course want to be able to answer any questions that you have. So please feel free to take care of yourself as you need to as we talk about this subject. So about over the past 2 to 3 years, the CDC has been doing a lot of research on what they have called the disease of suicide. And they are doing a lot of work around this that they began even with adolescents prior to the pandemic. So some of us may think oh, this is on the rise because of just the struggle that these teens went through, that our adolescents went through with the shutdown and getting back into school and figuring all of that out. But this was really something they were paying attention to with the CDC prior to, because of the level of hopelessness and the rise of depression that was already occurring amongst our adolescents. As of today, for adolescents 14 to 17 years old, suicide is the third most common way of dying for them. And for 10 to 14-year-olds, it's the second leading cause of death for our adolescents. So the CDC has seen this as something that is very trivial and very important, and is doing a lot of research on this, right? So they have found that 1 in 3 high school students experienced persistent sadness or hopelessness, and this is from research in 2019 and 2020. So even prior to the pandemic, that 1 in 3 high school students experienced persistent sadness or hopelessness. So not necessarily to the degree of being diagnosed with depression, but maybe just an overwhelming sense of just dread, overwhelming sense of hopelessness for the future. Why do I even try? What's even the point? Maybe their perfectionism is really starting to come up, and they're struggling within their school. Maybe they're feeling pressure from academics or sports that they put on themselves even. A majority of my clients will not say, my parents put the pressure on me. It's me, myself, internally putting this pressure on myself to make it to where I'm the best at something, I have perfected something, or otherwise I'm not worth a whole lot of anything. There's a lot of hopelessness around, if it's just college or job, why do I even try? If I don't know what I want to do at 14, why am I even trying? So again, these are not diagnosable, clear mental illnesses, right? They're just these overwhelming feelings of sadness and dread. That 1 in 3 high school students in the year of 2019, the CDC was finding in their research were experiencing these things. Now we can only imagine what maybe that number is at today, right? And that is a 40% increase from 2009 when they originally did studies on this. So just in 10 years, there could be a million factors as to why that is, right? We could all see from 2009 to 2019, smartphones became a lot more popular, social media became a lot more popular, family systems look a lot different than they used to. Lots of different things can contribute in 10 years, and that's kind of mind-blowing to think about. Just in 10 years, 1 decade, such a growth in like sadness, hopelessness, in mental health diagnosis. At the same time, in those 10 years, a lot more stigma has been broken around these things. A lot more conversations are being had. Like the fact that I'm standing in a church today, being able to share about this, right? That this is a topic people need to know about and learn about. Discussing mental illness, or even just emotions in general, and growing an emotional intelligence within your family system is a lot more on the rise as well too. Again, this research showed that 1 in 5 high school students has seriously considered suicide, and I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the range that falls in, as what we do with my work as well too, and most mental health therapists. And then the last fact I want to give you in that is that female students are almost twice as likely to actually create a plan for suicide. They are also more likely to have more failed attempts than males. A couple factors to this, if a male decides and makes a plan and an intent to die by suicide, they're usually going to find a method that will not fail. They will find something that is lethal. Whereas a female, the research has shown, and even in my experience with my kids, they're more likely to try something that may have a failed attempt, overdosing on pills, and changing their mind before being able to go through with that. Not something as lethal, such as like a gunshot or something that is guaranteed to end your life at that point in time. So I did ask Kevin a little bit for some, what are some like questions maybe that people have, and so I'm gonna go through a lot of those. And one of them was, what are the factors that increase the risk, right? Everyone wants to know, what are those telltale signs? What are the red flags? What could really increase this factor? And I want to say, because especially with suicide and mental illness in general, but especially with suicide, because there is no single contributing factor as to why this happens for this person and not this person, there is no single intervention. There is no single intervention that's going to help for across the board, right? It's not, oh, you're having this ideation, here's the medication for you. You're having this ideation, here's the therapy for you. There's so many contributing factors, whether that's biological, environmental, nurturing, social, school environments. There's so many contributing factors that there really is no single intervention when it comes to being able to single out, like, this will be the reason that someone is going to attempt suicide. So there is this assessment that has existed for a very long time that we still use today in therapy called the ACE, and this is the Adverse Childhood Experience Assessment. There's just 10 questions. All my kids take it when they come into our residential treatment center, and it asks questions such as, has there been a death in your family? Has there been drug use in your family? Has there been an incarceration, a house fire? Trying to think of some, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect. These kind of big topics, and asks if they've experienced any of those. Even just answering yes to one of those increases your chance of having a mental illness. Even just answering yes to one of those, right? Because it may be something like you haven't had any interventions, you didn't have the right support around you when you experienced that. Maybe someone does have the right support around them when they're experiencing those things. It just varies from experience to experience, right? But in that ACE assessment, and these adverse childhood experiences, and just answering yes to one of those, which don't even include the, bullying, doesn't even include manipulation, and how maybe being manipulated or coerced or catfished or lied to, or on those online experiences are not included in this yet. So it does need a little bit of updating. But what the CDC has done with that is, in order to be proactive, they've started to do a lot within this research about positive childhood experiences. Instead of having the adverse childhood experiences, even if those exist in a child's life, how can we also implement positive childhood experiences in order to not just counteract the adverse, but to provide that continual support and nurturing and positivity in the midst of experiencing something adverse. So I would say, for instance, I talk to all my parents who bring their children in to residential treatment center, is that it's a really bittersweet thing. It is heartbreaking that your child needs this level of care, and it's not a miracle. There's not a miracle that can be worked. At the same time, they've experienced a lot of adverse experiences, and what residential treatment can do is provide a positive. And our hope is to provide a positive childhood experience for them while they're on that path towards healing. So before we go into some PCs, some positive childhood experiences, I do want to kind of make sure we're clear on some of the language as well too. So a residential treatment center is some place a child would come after maybe they've experienced an emergency room visit or an acute facility. So an emergency room visit, a child may go to that because they've attempted suicide and it's been interrupted. They are mostly usually just from an attempt. You wouldn't probably go to the ER because of just having ideations. Now you may go to an acute hospital setting, which is about a week long. That can happen, when a child is having ideations. That's just overwhelming thoughts of suicide, wanting to die. It'd be easier if I were dead. I should kill myself. Just kind of these ruminating thoughts, where they're starting to feel unsafe, but they haven't yet come up with a plan and haven't decided if they have intent for that. At that point in time, I would 100% say they need a therapist. They need to find support. Your family needs to be talking about this at this stage, right? If they're sharing about that, that is good. I know that can be very overwhelming, but majority of the people who complete a suicide never spoke about it. Never shared about it. No one ever knew. You'll see it on the news stories. Families had no idea, right? Because they weren't talking about it. So it's terrifying to hear your child or maybe their friend or someone you're close with talking about this. And at the same time, that's actually a good thing, that they are talking about it. It means they're willing to get help. They're willing to have some kind of intervention, even if they think it's hopeless. So an acute setting, that would be, if you're familiar with this at all, that would be like a Peachford or a Ridgeview that are here in Atlanta. Summit Ridge is one that's really close to here too. Someone will stay in there for about a week for observation. And then as a family, you may decide my child needs a longer, more residential care, and that's when it would come to some place like me, a Skyland Trail, where they've gone to an acute setting, and they don't have have been able to come to us, but then they'll stay with us for about 12 weeks and be able to get some really intense therapies through the week and start establishing some safety and some self-awareness within themselves, gathering some insight in order to help correct or to maintain some stability from these behaviors, from these thoughts, from these overwhelming emotions that have kind of just flooded them, and they haven't been able to get too much help around that. So again, back to, kind of broke all that down so you can understand like a positive childhood experience and why, even though it's a bittersweet thing, I think for people to come to residential, like I wish my job didn't exist, I really do. At the same time, I am glad I have the opportunity to provide something like this for our adolescents in this day and age. So what a positive childhood experience can do in the midst of experiencing some adverse childhood experiences, which I would say suicide ideation, suicide attempts are part of that. is it works to rewire the brain from the disruption that maybe those adverse experiences had. And often, even if you think about maybe the adverse experiences that you had as a child, or maybe even as an adult, you probably didn't choose it. It probably happened to you. Maybe more as an adult, you're choosing some things that weren't really helpful for your long-term stability. But as a child, more often than not, you're not choosing that. It's happening to you, right? So there's been a disconnect, something for the child to have to choose to survive, right? So they learn coping skills to survive these experiences, right? And what a positive childhood experience would offer is a way to rewire that connection, a way to determine safety and not just survival, and stability within themselves. So actually, what the CDC has determined as one of the leading positive childhood experiences is actually a faith-based community, and being really entrenched in a faith-based community. And I have my reasons for why I think that that's important, right? And maybe you do as well, of why you choose faith. Why do you choose to come and to bring your family to be a part of this, right? This community. But what the CDC says is, faith-based communities usually provide a consistent witness. Something consistent, an adult that shows up consistently, a tradition that's there consistently, something that shows them that there is consistency, and that is there for them. It also helps provide places for good choices. How to start determining between what is helpful and what is harmful, what is not so as extreme to say good, bad, but also what maybe is more moral, what is virtuous, what is truth, and finding that in a faith-based community. And again, role models that are consistent, and a witness of faith in the midst of struggle. And this is what I love most about being Catholic. I love this about being Catholic, is that we really can embrace that suffering can bring good, can bring joy, can bring hope, can bring us closer to Christ. We really embrace that. And I mean, sometimes as Catholics we can go a little too far sometimes, and but at the same time, I think that's really good. That's a really positive value of our faith, that we can look at suffering and not be totally demolished by it. That we can find a lot of hope and a lot of faith in that. And alongside that, what happens with, even if your family is committed to faith, is getting to know other families and building community within that community. That's what the CDC says too, is being able, positive childhood experiences come from positive role models, and finding those in faith-based communities, and then even building community out of that. So they also say things like school counselors, making sure parents are conversing with the schools to allow the school to know what's going on with their child and what the adverse childhood experiences have, trying to get those resources, that can be a positive childhood experience. But I loved that they said that a faith-based community was one of the leading things. And I'll be honest with you all, majority of I did a group the other day with my kids, and I like to get the kids up and moving. Sometimes they're just sitting too long, and I like to get them active. And so we do this little icebreaker game to just kind of have them step in if they respond to something. Step in if you have a sibling, or we'll all be in a circle and step in if you have a sibling, or step in if you like pizza, or just kind of an easy way to get to know one another, build some safety with one another, kind of talk about things that aren't so heavy, but we probably had about 20 kids in the group, and I'm at a very secular organization, so I can't, just explicitly say Jesus all the time, even though I try at points. But I say step in if you believe in a higher power. If you are familiar with, recovery language at all, that's often used in recovery of a higher power, right? Step in if you believe in a higher power. And about out of 20 of us, maybe 4 of us stepped in. 4 of us. So if that tells you that our children in today are not being built up, are not being raised with tradition, with rootedness, with virtue, with structure, with belief that there is something bigger than themselves out there, with belief that they're a part of something bigger than themselves. Like, these things are monumental for us as human beings, and not just as faith-based human beings, but I think actually having a positive human experience is to know it's not all worth nothing. And so many of our kids are struggling with that, believing like, well, what's it all for? Why even try? I can't tell you how many times I hear that from my clients' mouths of like, what's even the purpose? If I don't want to go to college, why do I even try this? Why try to get a good grade? Why do schoolwork? None of it matters, Kaitlin. It doesn't matter, right? So much of the work that we're doing is finding life worth living goals in the present day. Not long-term, not way out there, but each and every single day. What's worth living today? Majority of them say dogs, like their dog, their pet. And I'm like, great, we'll go with that, right? Let's go with that for today. If that dog is worth living for today, hopefully it will be tomorrow as well too. As we build up their strength, their self-esteem, their beliefs about themselves, and healing, right? But faith really does provide a good point of reference for us, right? It's a way to always turn back to. People often ask me, like, how can you show up and do this work every day? And I will be 100% clear, it's Him. I have a point of reference. I have a rootedness. I have someone I can talk to at every minute of every day and invoke the Holy Spirit and hope, to come into my sessions, right? I have and know that there's something greater than myself at work here, and even in the helplessness that I feel sometimes, I know I'm not in control, right? Our faith roots us. It provides us purpose and meaning and direction, and attention away from like navel gazing, right? Like, it's all about me, I'm just so self-centered, right? Which sometimes therapy can get that rep. Like that, oh, you're just going to go talk about yourself for a long time and all your problems and, and not get to hear from other people's perspectives of what's really going on in this situation, right? But faith really does allow us a way to get our attention away from just ourselves. It guides us towards virtue, right? Yeah, so the importance of faith, and again, that positive childhood experience. So hopefully, maybe you have children who are here tonight, or your teens are a part of this program or have grown up in this church, and maybe some of you have adult children who are sadly not coming back to this, right? And not choosing this for themselves. But even for yourself, to be very convicted that this is a powerful experience and a seed planting for long-term growth for them. And that's even the way that I think about residential treatment, right? With my kids who are only with us for 12 weeks, that is not a miracle can happen in 12 weeks. I absolutely believe that. At the same time, they're going to have a long road ahead of them. And so even if they're not thinking about, dying when they leave us, not having ideations of wanting to die when they leave us, I prepare them for, when this comes back. When you have that thought again, because life is going to keep going like this, right? It's not like this all the time. It will keep coming up and down. So a lot of the work that we do is to give them the coping skills that they need for when it comes up again, when they have those thoughts again, right? Okay. I wanted to move some things around, so I want to make sure I can. Okay. So, how to recognize if your teen might be suicidal, or a friend, or a family member. How to start recognizing if this is something that they're going through. Again, there's a difference between suicide ideation, is just having those thoughts daily of it'd be easier if I were dead, I wish I could kill myself, life isn't worth living. It's just kind of all those thoughts. And at that point in time, absolutely needs some individual therapy. This could be this could be because they're experiencing depression. It could be because of impulsivity. It could be because they're just being bullied at school. It could be because their social network is really hard. I have kids along the gamut. They're not all just sad and depressed who want to die. There's a lot of perfectionism. There's a lot of really high OCD, social anxiety experiences that get them to that place as well. And then I do see, some of our kids do have personality disorders as well that lead them towards those behaviors. Or the, no one's gonna miss me if I'm gone anyway, so might as well do it. So again, there's passive ideations, and then there's the more active. And this is when they have a plan, they have the means to that plan, and they have the intent to follow through with that plan. So even as a family member, if your child does say, like, I'm really thinking, like, and again, it doesn't happen this casually usually, it's probably in the midst of tears or screaming, or, you know, you asking them over and over again, right? But if they do say, you know, yes, I thought about killing myself, asking, well, do you have a plan? And if they say no, like, okay, that's good. You know, if they say yes, asking them, okay, can you tell me what that is? Right? Can you tell me what that is? This is a terrifying conversation. I'm not saying it's as easy as this. But this is what I walk through with my kids too, and the clients that I'm serving as well too. And that calmness and that just like willingness to have that conversation actually can shift the dysregulation of it, right? Can kind of help calm the experience of it a little bit. I'm not saying it gets like 100% better, but and then they have the plan and the means to that plan. Remove that. Do what you can to take care of like getting that out of their means. And then if they do say like, yeah, I'm feeling unsafe, I'm unwilling to say no, I can't not do this, like I'm gonna do it if I had the chance, that's maybe where you take the next step of taking them to a hospital. If they have a plan and they have the means, and they're not willing to keep themselves safe, or they do not feel like they can do that themselves, that's when you would probably take them to the hospital, right? A lot of the kids, it says 1 in 5 have considered suicide. Ideations are gonna happen. Maybe you've even experienced that, of just saying, gosh, this would be easier if I weren't here anymore. Like, this is too stressful, this is too overwhelming, right? Many of us will have those passive ideations without creating a plan. That's maybe where we need to seek a little bit more help with just individual therapy. And then, yeah, today we're using terms more like died by suicide instead of committed, and being a little bit more sensitive to that, since it is a little more common these days to at least hear about it. And again, that could be for various reasons. And then oftentimes people will think self-harm behaviors of cutting or burning themselves or scratching themselves or pulling their hair out. There's various means. Our adolescents are incredibly creative when they want to hurt themselves. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get to a place of suicide, right? So we would refer to those as non-suicidal self-harm behaviors. And that doesn't automatically mean that they will be going towards suicide. They may just need a release for some of their pain. They may think they deserve punishment, and it's going to go to that place, right? But those two things don't necessarily go hand in hand. If your adolescent is self-harming, though, I would highly recommend getting them to a therapist to start talking through some of those things. Okay, but then if they're not talking about it and they're not sharing these kinds of things, how do you recognize if your teen might be suicidal? If they start obsessing about death, you're seeing that that's all they're watching, that's all they're paying attention to, they're talking a lot about that. They're really consumed by the afterlife and, you know, what does eternity look like? And I'm not sure that I believe in that. What's hell? You know, kind of really having those conversations a lot, not just in like a curious, like I want to learn way, but it's really becoming an obsession for them. Every single day they're interacting with trying to learn something about that. Again, making open suicidal threats, poems or drawings about death is a good time to start asking the questions. You know, like if you're seeing that, if they're presenting a lot of that stuff, maybe at school, at work, or not at work, well, maybe some of them might have jobs. If you see a really drastic change in appearance or in mood, and this could be on any part of the spectrum, just like really drastic changes, that indicates something significant has happened in their lives. And it could be leading them towards some good choices or some not good choices. Again, this is a mood both increased or decreased. If you're seeing that really drastically, a decreased mood or an increased mood may need some further questioning about this. Like, hey, what's going on? You know, are you willing to talk with me about, I'm just noticing like you've had a really intense increase in your mood. yeah, I'll say a little bit more about that in just a minute. If you're seeing more defiant behaviors when that hasn't been a normal part of like their childhood growing up already, again, if you have been dealing with defiance a long time and it's suddenly happening in their adolescence, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's headed towards a suicide ideation. But if that's coming out of nowhere, and that's really confusing, right? Of they haven't really been this defiant. And I don't mean like the normal adolescence of like, I don't like your rules, mom and dad, like I wish you were like every other parent, and like I wish you were cooler, or I'm, you know, skipping class, or maybe skipping class might be a big one, but yeah, not kind of the normalish adolescent kind of behaviors of where like it's normal that their peers become way more important to them at this time in their life than their parents do, right? It's where like for parents, it's like you start not just parenting, you're partnering, you're coming alongside, trying to help them make and direct and help them to make the right decisions, but they really make a lot of their decisions and have a lot of opinions about that, right? But really defiant behaviors, maybe they've started using drugs, maybe they're running away, maybe they're sneaking around a lot more, or yeah, being more of the like the really unsafe, risky, defiant behaviors. If they've started acting violently, if they start giving away their belongings, if they start giving away things, that can be a big indicator that they're thinking about doing something to end their life. And then if they start staying away from people and activities, again, very drastically, something that they loved and then all of a sudden they've stopped and they don't want to do that anymore, it's a good time to start asking those questions. Just kind of checking in, like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How's your emotional health? How's your mental health? And beginning to start those conversations. Now, I would say don't wait for any of those things to start having those conversations. Sit around the dinner table and ask highs and lows. Get in the car, pick them up. What was the high of the day? What was the low of the day? Tell me a feeling word that you have today. They're gonna roll their eyes and they're gonna say, this is ridiculous. But really starting to get them to talk through their emotions. And the ways, I mean, my clients do it too, and they know that that's even what they're there to do, right? They know they're there to talk through their feelings. But what I draw them even deeper into is like, well, tell me where you notice that in your body. How can you connect it? Not just what you think you're feeling, but what you're actually feeling. Like, oh, I'm anxious. Okay, you've got a big test coming up. Yeah, that makes sense. But where are you feeling it in your body? And giving them that minute to like pause and consider and kind of do a little scan, right? Of kind of noticing where we feel that in our body. I strongly encourage start using emotional language within your home, and really bringing feelings up and allowing that to become very normal, even at being angry, and using I statements, right? Well, I'm feeling really angry today, or I'm feeling really upset today, or I'm feeling sad today. You know, if you're able to do that around a dinner table or in the car when you have some time together. Really start bringing emotional language so that your kids start knowing it's safe to talk about this. It's safe to bring this up. I don't have to keep this hidden. Now, a lot of them are still going to try to stuff this down because it feels weird and awkward, or they don't know if they'll be heard or listened to, or they feel so unique and alone and they're the only ones, right? The other thing I would not necessarily say is an indicator for like a suicide risk, but just that they're probably having a little bit more mental health struggles, is that I found with a lot of my kids, they have really pure intentions. When they start feeling some depression or some anxiety, they notice their OCD, they notice their self-harming. A lot of them have really pure intentions to find communities online at first, and then it becomes consuming. And then they can't get out of it, right? So in the beginning, they want to find that connection because they want to know I'm not alone. And they want help finding language around this. They're like, I'm just feeling so depressed, but I don't really know. So they start searching for those things. They find it on Instagram, TikTok, and then you know how all those things work. It's all the algorithms, right? Then that's all that's going to be shown to them, or it's going to be more often shown to them. You know, I wish there was more of an algorithm of like, okay, if the kid starts looking at a lot of depressive things, like start sending the happy stuff, or like the more good feeling things, or show puppies. Like, I don't know, like let them see the things that make them happy, right? But yeah, and they get inundated with that, right? So even before our kids leave and go back home, we do a detox of their phone and their social media, because a lot of them have come to that conclusion themselves of like, wow, it was good at first, because I needed to know I wasn't alone. I needed to connect to other people who could give me support and language, but then it became all I did. And then it was all consuming, and then it wasn't helpful anymore. So starting for them to realize that. So if you're noticing that your kids or family members are just really focusing a lot on that kind of stuff, even if it's not towards a suicide type thing, but like all I'm looking at is extreme mental health experiences, that would be a really good time to have a conversation, to just kind of have a check-in, right? Okay. How to respond if you find out that your teen is having suicidal thoughts. What is the best course of action for this? First off, I want to, as best as you're able to, not to freak out and not to yell. How can you stay calm and content? How can you take some deep breaths? And hearing this is going to bring up multiple things for everyone. Fear, terror, helplessness, feeling out of control, maybe some hopelessness, maybe some confusion. How did we get here? How did this happen to you? What did I do wrong? It's going to bring up a lot of things. And in the moment when your child is telling you this, or they're telling you about a friend, being able to stay very focused on that situation right now, that ideation, is going to be the most helpful, right? We can deal with our feelings, in the next conversation, but you can ask them about, again, do you have a plan? Do you have the means to that plan? Do you have an intent to follow through with that plan? And then deciding if hospitalization is necessary. It may be more that you guys create a safety plan for that night. Okay, how about you stay in my room with me? How about we remove the door from your room? Let's lock up all the things that you feel tempted by. Different things like that, coming up with a plan. Having a check-in plan before bedtime. Maybe it's you sit down together and you watch a favorite show. So often my clients, when they're talking about what they needed from their parents, when they're feeling really emotional or having these kinds of thoughts, is that they just wanted someone to just be with them. Just to be with them. Don't talk to me, don't ask me questions. You have to get these questions in. You have to understand the level of safety, but then understanding, that they just wanted someone to be with them, and know that they weren't like physically alone at that time. And often when I ask the kids, well, why was that not possible? Why did that not seem? One, they usually were like, well, I never asked. Okay, let's practice asking. We do a lot of that, of asking for what you need. Or it was, no one was available, right? Which is so true for some of us sometimes, right? We have family homes where multiple of us have to work, where we're maybe just rushing around to get dinner, and it's kind of like, where do we find the time to bring up the bigger things, right? And so I coach a lot of my families to say, like, for either two things. One, have a consistent night every week. I know it's impossible usually in our family lives these days for there to be every night of the week, right? But is there one night of the week that your kids and your spouse and your family knows, tonight is the night we know we will be together? So that on that Tuesday night, when that's the kid can know that that's consistent, and I can expect to have that, as opposed to trying to find that time to squeeze in. The other thing that I coach them in is to have a room or a space that feels really safe in your house, designated to have those harder conversations, so that that if you're doing the dishes or you're cleaning up from dinner, or you're running around getting chores around, and your kid's trying to say, hey, I need to have a conversation with you, that's not one of those serious conversations, right? If the kid says, hey, I need to go talk to you in your bedroom, if that's the designated room, like mom and dad's room feels like the safe room, you understand, oh, I need to drop what I'm doing now, and I need to go and talk with them, because that's more the designated place where we have more of those really deeper conversations. If that's not already a consistent thing that you have in your family, right? But again, as calm as you can, just asking the means and the plans figuring out the level of safety right now, here and now, and then being able to ask the follow-up questions of like, okay, do you want to share with me how did we get here? What do you need? You know, after you've kind of maintained and understand safety. And again, as it's going to be hard, and maybe you've already experienced this, but as calm and focused as you can stay, and kind of allowing the other feelings that may come up for you to be worked on after that immediate conversation of kind of understanding where your kid was at with that. Now sometimes that's if, you know, the kid is able to say it really calmly. Now some people, a lot of my clients threaten suicide to their families. Like, I'm gonna go kill myself, right? And it's very impulsive and erratic, and honestly, time and time, it kind of wears on the parents after a while. It does. It feels like Peter Wolf, like, is this really gonna happen? You know, like, you're getting my nervous system up so much every time, and acting on the impulsivity, right? And understanding again at that time too of like, okay, you know, you may have to kind of chase after them a little bit to determine the level of safety, and then it may be more, I'm here once you're regulated again. You know, I'm here to help you. I'm here to support you. But sometimes we can just continue to yell and escalate the situation in that case as well too, right? They may go run into their room and slam the door, right? And as a parent, it's going to be like, I have to get that door open. They're going to hurt themselves. They said that they were going to kill themselves, right? And so yeah, try to get the door open for sure, right? And working towards that safety. But there is often times where it is just threatened over and over again too. And what I have noticed with those clients is that they will probably say it, and they will probably at some point in time do something, right? So it's really hard to know and to navigate those situations for sure. But even that kind of continual behavior of the threatening of it would be a great time to get them into a residential setting, or even a partial hospitalization setting where they stay with you at night, but they're in longer term therapy during the day. And Atlanta has a lot of opportunities for these if needed. Okay, what to do if this suicide is planned or has been attempted. So first off, again, regulating yourself, taking some slow, deep breaths so that you can respond effectively. Asking what has been done and assessing whether a hospitalization is needed. Again, I would say if an attempt has occurred, getting them at least to an ER is very appropriate to have them assessed. Especially if they've overdosed on anything, even if they are actively vomiting and getting rid of what is inside, still having them checked out is really appropriate. And these are really hard decisions to make because acute facilities are not fun, they're not pretty, it's not comforting, yeah, it's not a great experience, right? And sometimes that can be an experience a kid needs to be a little more open to, okay, I'll do the individual therapy. Okay, I'll go to the residential treatment. Even at my facility, we do have kids who get very actively suicidal and make attempts while they're with us. And we have to hospitalize them, in an acute facility for a week because we can't do one-to-one. An acute hospitalization, they can do that. And then when they return back to us, they are slightly more motivated usually of like, I don't want to do that again, so I'll keep trying to do what you're helping me to do. I'm gonna be a little bit more open to the resources you're providing for me. Is it still hard work to be in residential treatment? Absolutely. It is absolutely hard work, especially when you're already in a place where life doesn't feel like it's worth living. It can be really, really tough. Yeah, so if your teen does have a plan or has actively tried that and is unable to regulate themselves, so their emotions are really high, they're really upset, there's a couple of different like grounding techniques that you can use right away to kind of help them get to a more calm state. One is a temperature change, so either getting them in a cold shower, giving them an ice pack, a cold rag, maybe it's more heat for them, so maybe it's wrapping them in a warm blanket, putting them in a hot shower, putting them in a hot bath. Working on some paced breathing. If you go on YouTube or Spotify or anything, there are a billion things that walk you through this, because you may need it at the same time, right? Of just kind of walking through some paced breathing, counting your breaths, doing like square breathing, imagining that your breath is going in a square. The 5 senses is a good grounding tool. Very, very easy to enact. Just asking your child, okay, tell me 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things that you can smell, 2 things that you can taste, 1 thing you can hear, right? And these are great tools, even just for any kind of dysregulation for your kids, like over-emotional, getting flooded by emotions. It doesn't have to be alongside ideation. It can be even just increased anxiety, a panic attack, something like that. And then progressive muscle relaxation is a good way to calm them too. Just starting at the top of their head and working your way down, scrunching up like all the muscles in your face, and then feeling yourself letting them slowly release, or like in a fist and then feeling it slowly release. It gives you back a little more sense of control when you do that really slowly, letting your muscles release very slowly. Again, and then getting them into the hospitalization. Okay. Trying to think where I wanted to go to next. Again, some other things that I think as of now, like what can you be doing to be proactive about this as well for any mental health illness or leading towards suicide? Again, it's just begin communicating openly and honestly, using I statements of how you're feeling, expressing your positive feelings, and then active listening. Again, this is that like eye contact, that nodding, the reflecting what you're hearing them say, not the distracted, I gotcha, yep, cool, yeah, whatever, awesome, that's good, great job, I hear you. You know, like really like, let me give you 5 minutes of my attention, which I know is hard. I know that is hard. We have a lot to get done, right? Again, that's that idea of setting aside a room for those more serious conversations. I've also noticed, and maybe this is the way I was when I was an adolescent too, but I'm seeing this so much with my clients, is that they need really, really, really specific things in the adolescence these days of like, oh, I need you to be more honest. They need like really specific of like, what do you mean by honest, right? Or we need to really work on our trust. Okay, what are the things we do to work on trust in this family? I need you to be more helpful. Really specific things to be more helpful. So as much as you can, like be as specific as possible. I'm just noticing that a lot with my clients, especially even the ones who are struggling a lot with perfectionism. And that's really getting them very overwhelmed and very ruminating a lot, and their head just feels so full that they just want it to end. They just don't want to deal with that anymore. They want that to be done. Giving them really specific tasks and really specific examples of how to do that, right, and communicating that. Continuing to create family time through rituals and traditions. Again, that brings in that rootedness, that consistency. Becoming more engaged in their school and their activities. Helping them with homework, volunteering at their school, being more of a visual presence. And again, I know some of the kids are gonna say, I wish you weren't around so much, right? And we have to be okay making our kids uncomfortable and making them mad at us. We don't have to be their friend. We wanna say that we're consistent, we're showing up, and we're gonna be a good witness to you of what healthy decision making is, and what healthy emotional expression is, and what healthy discussion is, not just because I said so. We want to be a model to you of that. And then also a model of faith, right? And of hope in the midst of all of that. Again, and also like communicating with teachers and administrators if there are things going on with your child, being open about those things. And then one of the final kind of broad question topics is what to do when your child has a friend who died by suicide or has attempted, when it's adjacent and it's a friend. And I get this question all the time. My office is in Chamblee. We service a lot of the Atlanta private school communities, a lot of there's so many private schools I had no idea existed in Atlanta, but we just get kids from all of these and a lot, and all over the country as well too. A lot of parents will come and say, we need a support group for the friends of these kids. Like, we need group work for the friends of these kids. So I was actually, as I was preparing for coming here tonight, I started thinking a lot about the apostles, actually, and them being in the upper room after Christ died. And, you know, we think about them, you know, being scared of, you know, the authority in the town, and, you know, Jesus was just crucified and he was supposed to be the savior, and the confusion of that, and, you know, we're waiting on the Holy Spirit and we don't really know what we're supposed to be doing, right? Like just all the confusion. And it only just clicked with me, like, yes, the savior of the world who they were following for 3 years really intimately died, and also their friend who died by suicide in Judas. And I just started imagining, like, what were their conversations about that? How are they talking about Judas? How are they grieving his loss? How are they dealing with the confusion that they had around, wait, how did we not know this person well enough to know he was going to betray our Savior? You know, and what were the conversations happening around that experience as well too? The loss of both of these lives that were so pivotal for them, you know, and this person that they walked with, two people that they walked with very intimately for 3 years, right? And start imagining that, and, you know, and again, thinking about these parents who have said, like, our kids really need support groups, and I'm like, they just need an upper room. They need a space where it's going to be okay to feel what they feel and say what they say, that they can be angry and not be judged by that they can be disappointed, sad, grieving, compassionate, and not feel judged, and be able to be where they are. About in 2019, so I've been practicing therapy since 2016, and I went to graduate school here in Atlanta and had 3 really close friends who we will say we survived graduate school together. It's a very intense process. Kevin's wife just went through this, so she knows too, that it's a very intense process, especially your last year in internship, and you just want to be around people who understand what it is that you're going through and get this process, right? And then 2 years after we graduated, one of those 4 died by suicide. And it was really, the other 3 of us, me and the other 2, went through the stages of grief very differently and at very different times. Even though our relationships were all very similar with this person. But there was a lot of difficulty around, wait, this person knew how to get all the help that they needed. They were a therapist. They had the resources, they tried the resources, they hospitalized themselves, they did all of these things. And it was one of those situations where nobody knew she was thinking this. Nobody knew she was thinking this. And again, it's in hindsight, you can kind of start piecing some things together, right? That you could consider that. But what I realized just me and my friends needed is that we needed to be able to gather together and feel whatever we felt at whatever time we felt it, and not experience that judgment, right, around it. And it needed to be with people who knew her. You know, oftentimes when these traumas happen in schools or things like this, it's big assemblies or it's come one-on-one, right? But we do need those small groups of people who are actually connected to that person, not just curious about the person, not just, even if they are having their own traumatic experience, but really directly with that person, they need a space to be able to feel and to talk about their friend in whatever way that they are. And having food provided is a really good way to do that too. So, but as parents, if this is your home a place where that could happen? Are you willing to be the one to say, hey, child, gather your friends. This is going to be a place where we can talk through this, where we're going to be open about this. I don't have the answers, but I want to provide a space that is safe to talk through these things. Because they do need to talk about this. They do need a space to be able to do that. You know, if a friend has attempted. And yeah, I was just really thinking about the apostles and all of that. And again, maybe this is a situation that you're going through really directly right now, and feeling really hopeless, feeling really helpless. And I do want to say there is a limit to us. as human beings. There is a limit, even if we are trying our best and we love these people deeply and we want to affirm them and tell them all the strengths and all the good, and we want to speak all that into them, right? Into their lives and tell them why their life is worth living. The reality is that has to come from them. They have to have an internal and personal reason to be able to do that. And I wish we were enough. I wish family was enough. I wish, those things were enough, but it really does have to come from them, and them to determine a life worth living goal. So in the midst of working with this clientele, with these people who are really struggling day in and day out with wanting to die and talking about suicide and death pretty much most days, the thing that I cling to a lot in my work is, and if you've been to a talk of mine before, I share this often because I just find it very critical for my own life, is clinging to the Gospel of Mark 9, where Jesus sent out the disciples. They were on their missions to cast out demons and to heal the sick. And, they come back and they return to Jesus, and they're like, Jesus, why didn't it work? Why couldn't we heal these people or cast out these demons? Jesus, why didn't my therapeutic intervention work? Why wasn't it the thing? And Jesus responds to them and says, some things can only be cast out with prayer and fasting. Some things can only be cast out with prayer and fasting. For people like us, especially Americans, we want to do and do and do and have control and want to take it, and we want to get all the resources and we can get all the help and we want to do all the things, right? And Jesus clearly says some things can only be done with prayer and fasting. Some things can only be cast out with prayer and fasting. So if this is something you are currently going through, having a situation like this and feeling helpless, feeling discouraged, maybe even feeling the loss of that person in your life, in that helplessness, pray and fast. Pray and fast. And Jesus can work miracles in that.